So we thought we ought to have a chance to test fly this airplane before we took this rather substantial overwater flight to Ascension Island. And we were told in no uncertain terms that we were just trying to avoid combat and to get the show on the road. We did. When we had passed the point of no return by about 5 minutes, the right engine quit. And of course, in that airplane, we knew enough about it to know that if we were flying on single engine, it was going to burn 4 times as much fuel as it would normally, and that we would never reach land. So at this point, I don't know whether there ever was subsequently, we had never heard of a B-26 making a water landing and having anyone survive. So there was no question we had to make a water landing. There was no possibility of surviving by bailing out and trying to exist in a Mae West. It just wouldn't work. So an hour and a half later, we had gotten the fuel down to the point where the airplane was about as light as it was going to be. We'd thrown everything out of the airplane to lighten it, got rid of our clothes, the radios, just about everything that was movable. And we made up our minds that we were going to go in. So the pilot and I both shoved the seat in the airplane back as far as we could get it, braced ourselves, and he looked at me and said, "Shall we do it now?" And I said, "We better do it." So this is a hard decision, but we picked out a wave and flew right into it. The tail dragged, and that, of course, pitched the nose right into the next wave, and it crashed. And the airplane literally dived into the water. We all swam up to the surface. It floated not at all. And after we had managed to struggle on to the life raft, we saw the hulk of the plane come up because it had a little buoyancy, and we noticed that both engines had been knocked off, and it had broken right behind the navigator's compartment. And actually, the way we managed to get that raft out was something quite unusual and attributable to the athletic skills of the bombardier, who was the one who was assigned to do the job. The raft was stowed in the top of the fuselage right above the wing, and there was a metal panel that kept it inside and streamlined, so that you're supposed to pull a cord. You pull the cord once, and that would pop the panel out. And we had decided that you couldn't pull it until we were through flying, because you had a pretty good chance of knocking the tail off if you pulled it too early. So Geyer pulled the cord once, and then it hit bang into the wave, and he pulled it the second time. The second pull was the one that inflated the air bottle. He never did find out how he got out of there. He tells different stories even to this day. My recollection of the story he told us immediately thereafter is he must have gone through the nose. He later said he got out through the perspex at the top, the navigation dome, but I guess he really didn't know. Anyhow, one of the things that saved our lives is the fact that the other 3 airplanes in the flight stayed with us. They saw us crash. They saw us get out of the aircraft. They saw us get on to the raft. They knew we were alive because we waved at them. So we later found that they got to Ascension Islands and really immediately started raising Cain. They wanted somebody to send a ship back to look for us, to do something. And actually the next day, we did see a B-24 that was headed right for us, and it stopped about 2 or 3 miles short, turned around, went back. Well, I guess they had misplotted our position, because we found later that we were drifting about 25 miles a day back towards South America. So we did various things to try to attract rescuers, but we'd see these planes flying over at 10, 11,000 feet, which is their normal altitude flying across the ocean. Obvious that this is the reason that they had never gotten anybody back that had fallen into the South Atlantic, is that they weren't close enough to the ocean to be able to see an airplane. Finally, on the fourth day, some C-47s came by at about 500 feet. They saw us, and they tried to drop supplies to us, waved at us. This lifted our morale considerably, and we really needed it by that time, because I'd forgotten to mention about the first thing that happened after we sat down in the life raft. We decided we'd take stock of what we had. So we opened up this sort of sleeve that had all of our emergency rations, fish lines, and all this gear, and started counting it. About that time, a big wave hit the raft. The raft turned over, and everything went down in the drink except one can of water, which was about the size of a beer can. And I happened to have that can in the pocket of my flying suit. So that's what we had to go on until we were picked up. And we got quite adept at taking one sip. And everybody, the other three would be watching the guy that had the can to make sure his Adam's apple didn't move more than once. And we each have that one sip a day. And it actually, that 11 ounces lasted for an entire 4 days. On the fifth day, we were running out of everything. By this time, the raft was in 2 compartments. One of them had sadly gone, so only half of it was inflated. The last paddle had gone over the side because the person entrusted with it had gone to sleep. This had happened twice, and this was only normal. Nobody would complain, but we were sitting there on a half a raft, no paddle, no nothing. And we saw this amphibious plane fly over. It was obviously a United States Navy plane. And we waved at him, but he wouldn't come down because the waves were about 5 or 10 feet in height. He wasn't about to land. So pretty soon he left, and our spirits went down again. And here comes a destroyer, and it goes by waving at us. And finally, we thought nobody was going to pick us up. The destroyer was escorting a light cruiser, the USS Marblehead, which sent out a motor whale boat, hauled us in, and took us into the cruiser. So we all thought that we'd be very smart. We would step up onto the cruiser deck, salute the gangplank, or whatever you do when you're a Navy person. But we discovered that none of us had any legs at all. We couldn't stand. So we were taken to sick bay and spent the next, 24 to 36 hours alternately taking a drink of water, going to sleep, waking up about a half hour later, drinking more water, and so on until we recovered our sea legs.